that we were able to have Peter Welch, Congressman Peter Welch, join us today. And you know, he's been a congressman for over 10 years, and we're trying to do the math real quickly at this table. And we really have appreciated his support for all the different initiatives that he has been able to bring forth for Vermont. But you know, I try and find something out about people so you get a little inside information that nobody else may know. So you know, I asked him what his hobbies were, and he loves to run, and he's a cross-country skier. And here's the inside scoop. He gets on his phone every day a new poem. So he is truly an appreciation of the arts, and especially within poetry. So it's with my pleasure that I introduce Peter Welch. Thank you.
You know, it's really good to be here. We've been having a great day in Bennington. I don't know how many of you have been to the homeless shelter. It's unbelievable. I mean, how does Chris do so much with so little? It's really extraordinary, and there's a lot of programming there. Everybody who comes in is obviously in a pretty desperate situation, but if you're there, then you meet with somebody to start talking about the future and commitments you have to make to try to address the situation you're in. Really impressive. And then, of course, we met at the hospital and got some of the folks right here. All of the different people around here in organizations that are working on the opioid crisis. Lisa, thank you so much for hosting us. A lot to be proud of. And it kind of reminds me, you know, you're the one who claimed you had the best grandchild, right?
Bob did.
Yep. Well, you're wrong. I have the best grandchild. That's what I love about Rotary. Yeah, you do. So, I mean, and brag on. You know, isn't it wonderful where we all think we have the best partner, we have the best grandchild. Most of us don't claim to have the best children, all right? They can be a challenge. But it's one of the wonderful things about Rotary that I always really enjoy, just embracing what is local and where you have an opportunity to make a difference in your family, in your community. And that's really, to me, what Rotary is about. I came with a big entourage today, led by Allie from right down here in Bennington, and you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
In our office. And I do want to forewarn you, as Alice said, I just got appointed to the Intelligence Committee. I'm watching you all. But I want to say a couple of things, and then we'll open it up for questions. But first of all, it's so important the work that you're doing, like at the hospital and all of the groups that are addressing the opioid condition and the challenge that we have. That you've got people committed like Chris to doing practical things on very limited budget on homelessness. That you're working so hard on the Putnam block because that can be a central component of revitalizing downtown. And that commitment to community and community building is what is so essential, especially when our rural communities across the country are under enormous pressure. And when I talk about the challenges that we face here in Vermont in the rural communities, my most conservative Republican colleagues, it's the same thing in their communities as well. So there's some room here for us, if we kind of adopt your approach, where addressing the problem as opposed to having a fight about how it happened or what's the best solution. We just get on with business to try to address it, like I'm seeing here in Bennington, and it's really kind of inspiring me. That's where there's some potential for progress. This year is new. We've got, you know, we had this election last year, and then, frankly, I think the biggest question that the American people had in this election was their view on the performance of the president. Because the midterm election, you know, every 2 years you re-elect a new House of Representatives. The reason it's a 2-year election is because the framers of our Constitution wanted to give the American people an opportunity in that 2-year window to send a message to Washington that they want a mid-course correction. So we had a change of majority in the House from Republican to Democrat. My view on that is it has a lot less to do with the validation of what the Democrats are doing. It had, in my view, a real expression of concern about what President Trump was doing, including some of his language and rhetoric that has been, from my point of view, pretty divisive. So what's happened now? The Democrats are in the majority, but I think we've got to be pretty modest about what it means that we're in the majority. Modest in the sense that this was not endorsing everything we're doing. What it did is give us an opportunity to earn the trust of voters by how we govern. And my view is that we have things that there's a lot of room to make progress on. Number one, rural America is really in need of reinvestment and reinvigoration. And that is something that if we're successful in addressing with, like, say, high-speed internet across this country, making a commitment to getting broadband out into all of America, similar to the commitment that was made in the 30s to get electricity out to all of America. You know, when that decision was made, it wasn't on economic grounds. There was no economic case to be made to electrify all of America. But there was a social case to be made. There was a recognition of the importance of what rural America contributes in terms of values, in terms of sense of community, to the whole well-being of the country. We've got to make that same decision when it comes to broadband, because it's a commitment to revitalizing rural America. One of the things that we've been talking about is the high cost of prescription drugs, and it is brutal. You know, I was with some folks who have type 1 diabetes, and the cost of their medication is going up 2-3 times in the past 4 or 5 years. They have no control over that cost. And of course, with type 1, that can happen to any of us. We can get a diagnosis tomorrow that we have type 1 diabetes, and that's a life changer. But you can't have the pharma industry that has enormous pricing control just escalating those costs so that it's beyond reach of families. And there's room for Republicans and Democrats to take action, essentially to do what every other country does, where the government plays an effective role on behalf of consumers to stand up against, in fact, I'm going to use a tough term here, but it's true, price gouging on the part of an industry that has monopoly pricing power. So my view is that in Washington, we have to start addressing concrete challenges that we face in our country. And my view is that if we establish, I'll talk me as a Democrat here, if we establish a record of accomplishment, and we put on the floor bills that would allow all of us to vote yes or no on lowering prescription drugs, and we do things that are good, whether you're voted for Trump or you voted for Clinton, that's the way we're going to start restoring confidence in Congress. And it's got a long uphill slog ahead if we're going to succeed in that. But it's essential that we do, because like it or not, the Constitution gives a significant amount of responsibility to our United States Congress as a co-equal branch of government to do things that, by what we do, make it easier for people back here, all those folks I was with at the hospital working on the opioid crisis. If we have policies that make it easier for them to be successful doing the work, the important work in the community, then that's success. And we'll be validated by that depending on what we do. So my focus is to have us do concrete, practical things that are going to be good whether you're from a red state or a blue state. The second thing I want to say, and then we'll open it up for questions, is I had this wonderful experience where I was speaking about Norman Rockwell. And the Rockwell Museum, of course, is over, we have our Rockwell home here, but it's over in Sturbridge in Massachusetts. And there's gonna, which bridge? Stockbridge. Yeah, that's what I said. I said Stockbridge. So,
spoken like a true politician.
I'm busted. But in any event, there is an exhibition that's going to be down at George Washington of many of his paintings. And, you know, the iconic Four Freedoms and that wonderful portrait, that little girl who was being escorted by police when they were desegregating a school. Oh, it's amazing. But so I was asked to speak and say a few words, and I did. And it got me to thinking about Rockwell. And I remember as a boy picking up the Saturday Evening Post, and I didn't know who Rockwell was, right? But I knew what I was looking at, and it just absorbed me, even as this young person. And what I found so powerful about him was that he portrayed everyday people, everyday Americans from small towns. And that portrait in the Four Freedoms, when it's the man at the town meeting, and I think it was somebody from, some of the people were from around here. That person was confident, was self-assured, as modest as their circumstances were, and as modest as their clothing was, nothing fancy. But there was a self-assurance and a confidence that was being projected when that person was speaking. And the point I added to it was that that person was that way, not just because of their own qualities, but they came from a community that was self-confident and self-reliant, and where there was mutual support. And there's nothing quaint about that. That's the way we want to live. And what we do in our institutions, whether it's the Rotary here, or your hospital down here, or in Congress, it should all be about creating that sense of empowerment that people need to feel, where whatever their circumstances, they're authorized to speak, they're authorized to act, they're authorized to contribute. So I'm quite excited about being back in Washington. Sometimes people think I need a mental status exam when I say that. But it's great representing Vermont. And the challenges we face right now, they're really significant. There's no question about it. But they're the challenges we face. So when I am at the homeless shelter that Chris is running, or I'm with all the folks who are cooperating to address the opioid challenge, I see people who are willing to face the problem, not deny its existence. And the satisfaction we ultimately get in life is by the commitment we make to trying to make the day a better day, the community a better community, and we just keep at it. So I've got that opportunity to be your voice in Washington and try to bring a little bit of the Vermont sensibility to a place that needs a lot more of it. So I want to say thank you, and it's great to be here, and my compliments to the chef. That was a really good meal, and I'm going to have to run an extra mile before dessert. So thank you. I'll open up for questions.
Well, I don't mind breaking the ice, but if you've talked to people locally on the opioid crisis, no doubt you can recognize that the most insidious part to our culture is its effect on our children.
Right.
And at the hospital, I've heard between 50% and 75% of children are born addicts.
Mm-hmm. Well,
So, I was wondering if you would support something in a prenatal program or a program with mothers to help this program. I think that would, to help the mothers,
right.
and have prenatal care that includes something that would put an end to some sort of drug abuse.
Yeah.
It's just a very insidious program. I have one more quick one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you support the jihadist wife coming back to the United States?
Well, number one, on your opioid treatment, of course I support that. I mean, the treatment program, we've got folks here who've been working on it. You want to have treatment that works for the particular circumstance of the individual involved, and you definitely want to have a priority on, the unborn children, or the people, the children who were born with an addiction. And, I'm from up in Norwich, and I know there's a number of people who volunteer at Dartmouth Hitchcock, basically to hold these newborns and almost be surrogates for them as the mother is going through a kind of withdrawal in a treatment program. So, yeah, I mean, you point out one of the most heart-wrenching aspects and effects of this. And second, no, I don't support her coming back. I mean, there's a question as to whether she's, quote, a citizen. And there's a couple of things about this. We're gonna have a real issue, all countries are, about what to do with the jihadists. And there's gotta be, obviously, primary concern about our safety. But that's true for France, it's true for Germany, you know, there were, yeah, so I don't quite have the answer on this, but I think obviously the first issue for all of our countries where some young people did go to Syria and join ISIS, that's a real security issue for all of us. And all of us have to be in it together. So no, I don't favor her coming back, but I want to acknowledge that this is a tough and thorny problem that somehow, some way, we've got to deal with. Yes, sir. Or ma'am.
Can you mention what your responsibilities will be in the Intelligence Committee? Just an overview of.
Yeah, I can't, there's two aspects in the Intelligence Committee. First of all, let me give a little history. We have 17 different intelligence agencies, and they include the FBI, the CIA, the Defense Intelligence, and they have an immense amount of responsibility and authority to get information that is intended to protect our national security. But there's also a responsibility that Congress has to make certain that as they do that job, it's consistent with protecting our constitutional liberties. And if you remember what happened in a period, this is probably during, I don't know if people remember Senator Frank Church from Idaho, but there was an immense amount of resistance on the part of the Intelligence Committee to share any information about what they were doing with Congress, even though it's the job of Congress to do oversight. And about 30 years ago, there was created the House and the Senate Committee on Intelligence, the House Select Committee on Intelligence. And the agreement that was more or less made was that the security agencies, all those 17, would on a regular basis report to a select members of Congress. And the deal was they would share the information of what they were doing. And some of the stuff really was way across the line and caused a lot of trouble. But the members of the committee would safeguard the secrets that were required in order for them to do the national security job that's important to our country. So in the House, there's 13 Democrats now and 9 Republicans. And we'll be receiving daily briefings about what is going on. We'll be responding, we'll be doing oversight. And the goal is national security and constitutional protection, okay? We're not authorized to speak about whatever secret information is given to us in the course of that. So that'll be the ongoing area of responsibility. And it would be everything from what's going on in the Middle East to cyber attacks from China to what's the status in Afghanistan. And a lot of the information that we'll get will oftentimes be publicly available, or somehow the press will get it, it'll be in the New York Times and the Washington Post, but there'll be times when it really is much more sensitive, doesn't get out, doesn't get leaked, and my responsibility will be to protect your constitutional rights and make certain that the intelligence agencies are able, within the law, to do everything possible to keep our country safe. So that's the overall. Secondly, it's very much a part of the responsibility of the committee now to be doing the Russia investigation. And that's what's got it in the news so much. I mean, there is overwhelming evidence from the conclusion of all our intelligence agencies that in fact there was widespread aggressive not efforts, but actions by Russia to interfere with our election. And I believe none of us want a foreign power to be influencing our elections. The last election, the next election, any election. And The question about who knew what when, those will be things that the Intelligence Committee will be, it'll be within our jurisdiction. Mr. Cohen is gonna be coming in to testify, Michael Cohen, the president's lawyer, before two committees I serve on. I'm on the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee. Mr. Cohen's coming in for that, but he's also gonna be coming into the Intelligence Committee, where there would be Russia questions there, whereas in the Oversight Committee, there won't be. Thank you. Yes,
Oh, I have so many questions. Do you have your,
go
do
ahead.
you have your questions ready that you want to ask her yet?
I do not have them yet. Yeah, actually working on that this weekend.
As far as infrastructure is concerned, every time you hear the sound bites from politicians, it's airports, roads, and things like that. We live in the Northeast, and our water systems and subways and things like that are falling down. They're full of lead. You look at Michigan, Pennsylvania, New York, upstate, it's awful. Everything, it's falling apart. Can we start a WPH kind of program for that?
Well, I'd be in favor of that. I mean, the infrastructure we've been talking about for a number of years, and have been unsuccessful getting funding for it. You know, when Mr. Boehner was the speaker, and the Republicans who were in the majority, we were going through the spectacle of authorizing the transportation bill for 3 months at a time. Can you believe that? I mean, you can't plan a bridge, let alone build a bridge in 3 months, or a water system. And the problem was that the Congress was unwilling to fund it. And, you know, last I knew, potholes don't fix themselves. We've got to pay for it. And I told Mr. Boehner, I said, look, we're all for the infrastructure. We're having a hard time paying for it. I will vote for any revenue source you put on the floor, okay? And we've got a new majority, and I think we will have the ability to get an infrastructure bill on the floor. And I do know that you speak not just for Vermont, but you speak for lots of America, where the water infrastructure is really aging. You know, up in Rutland, it goes back to the Civil War, some of the pipes that are there. So we need that. That's actually good money. That's money well spent, well invested. And it's everything from the water systems to the roads and bridges, to high-speed rail, to rural broadband, which I want to be a very big part of it. So that, I hope we are successful in that. Yes, sir. You.
Oh, yeah, and picking up on your previous comments about Norman Rockwell in Arlington, the person who was in that meeting was the four freedoms he depicted of was freedom of speech, and the person was from Arlington, was George Hess Senior.
Yeah.
Senior, and the reason that is significant is that he got up to defend another person's right to speak, who was not popular with the people, and was going to bring up something that a lot of people were against. But he got up to speak, to let this person speak as a freedom of speech.
You know, that's so wonderful. It's kind of bringing chills to my spine, you know? Now, Tom and I were talking about this on the way down, the social media, which is used oftentimes to beat up on people for saying anything, you know, and it's so filled with invective. It's disturbing to all of us, and it really diminishes the level of debate and discussion. And what you just described is that confident person who is not fearful that somebody's going to get up and express a contrary point of view. You know, if they have a different point of view, let's hear it, no big problem. And that's strength, that's not weakness, so thank you for that.
I was one of Rockwell's subjects on more than one occasion.
You were?
And I have to tell you that the confidence was not always there. My first sitting was for a Boy Scout calendar, and he
Really?
called the Cub Scout troop in North Bennington, who was North Duncan Campbell at the time. I don't know if anybody remembers that. And asked him to send up somebody to sit for this Boy Scout calendar. and he wouldn't do it, so he bought the whole troop up, because he was afraid that the mothers who weren't selected, who didn't send up, would give him so much trouble. And from that, I wound up on a post cover.
You did.
Yes,
That is
But
so
you're also
cool.
on the front cover of Post magazine.
Post magazine,
Post magazine.
post cover,
What did you-
November of,
Which one?
49.
November of 49.
Wow.
Ted was too. He was several.
I was on a George Hughes cover, that doesn't count.
You know, who knew? All the celebrities. Yes.
I just wanted to know how you felt about, like, the Vermont trying to pass that H-57 bill and the Roe versus Wade changing that ruling.
Well, you know, I'm not gonna speak too much on it, but here's what I think. I think Roe v. Wade I totally support, okay? I haven't read all the details, but obviously there's a point at which you've got a viable child. So, we were talking a little bit on the way down. And I think it's really, and I think what's happened, I think that, I totally believe that it's up to the woman and her doctor and counsel, whoever, that's gotta be your choice. But obviously, there's a point that there was a discussion about that, the governor in Virginia. Yeah, and I think that's different. I mean, that's just a different deal. So thank you for that. Yes, sir.
I think we're all becoming more aware of the melting of the polar ice caps and the upcoming raising of sea levels and the heating of the temperature of the earth. And it seems like our whole world is facing a real crisis in the environment. I wonder what kinds of visions you have of how we're going to address that.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. This is really a serious problem. And this is not something where we can get religion, you know, a few years from now and decide, all right, we're gonna flip the switch and do it right. Because as you know, this warming with the carbon emissions, even if we went to zero emissions today, it would continue for a number of years, okay? So this is very, very alarming to me about the president's denial of science and denial of the problem. You know, it's what I was saying earlier. You know, confident people, you don't deny a problem. You might argue about what's the best solution or what we can afford, but you won't deny its existence. And that's what's happening, that's what's been happening in Washington. I mean, the policies of the president to essentially get us out of the Paris Accords, to gut the EPA, to basically be all in on increasing carbon emissions, is totally stupid and very dangerous. And it also, what it fails to acknowledge is that if we take on the challenge of making that transition to energy efficiency and renewable energy, we can create a lot of jobs. Okay, it's in the effort to solve a problem that you actually create a stronger economy. And time's really, the clock is ticking on it, and that's why, pardon me, you know, I signed on to the Green New Deal, and sometimes there's a lot of pushback on it, like it's pie in the sky and so on. But what it is, basically, is a resolution that states affirmatively that the clock is ticking and we don't have much time. And then the harder job, and I'm on the Energy and Commerce Committee, is to then take concrete, practical steps to be bringing down carbon emissions. And if we just did a lot more energy efficiency, Vermont's been a leader on that, we could reduce carbon emissions by 40%. We have building standards, you know, so you build things that don't leak energy. You have appliance standards that use less energy. I mean, in many cases, industry is all on board with these things, and they get it. And the young people are the folks who are gonna, I think, save us, because they know what a crisis this is. So thanks for bringing that up. Yeah. Can you let me go back to you?
Would it be a big PR thing to get all these industries that are closed in the Midwest, the northern Midwest, car manufacture plants and things like that, to start making solar appliances and
Well, see, I think that's the right idea, you
so
know.
why don't they wanna get on board? Is it just the Republicans that are
It's-
stopping it?
It's not, there's two issues, I think. One is, we have to acknowledge something. The transition is disruptive, okay? So those of us who want a renewable energy and efficiency and reduce carbon emissions don't want to burn coal. If you're a coal miner, that's gonna be disruptive. So part of what we have to do is include addressing those transition issues for folks like coal miners. So in the Midwest, there's been a lot of steel, a lot of manufacturing, a lot of it was based on cheap power. And, I mean, they've been affected much more by the jobs going to China than they are the cost of energy. But the point is, part of our approach for strong environmentalists, for a clean economy, has to be appreciation for the real disruption that's caused as we're getting out of, let's say, coal. And I'll give an example of that. I have a colleague, David McKinley, Republican from coal country. And he represents coal miners, and he cares about them. In fact, you go into his office, and he's got this beautiful life-size photograph of a coal miner at the end of his shift coming out, being greeted by his daughter. And the coal miner's got grit and grime. He's got that pride of a father seeing his daughter. His daughter's looking at him like he's a hero, you know, she just admires him. He cares about his people. But all the coal country people are blaming the EPA for everything, all right? And it really has very little to do with what's happened to coal. It's much more the price of natural gas and the carbon emissions. There's been a lot of transition. But he's helped me a lot on energy efficiency. And I said to him, David, I'd like to meet your coal miners. So I went down to his house, spent the night, and then the next day we went to the Harrison mine deep in West Virginia. I went down 1,000 feet, 4.5 miles into one of those little coal cars, and I spent the afternoon on a shift with these miners. And I came out, and number one, these guys work hard. And there were some women down there too. They work hard. And number two, I said, you know, we don't have coal, and they know I'm from Vermont, so it's not like, you know, you think I'm on their side on coal. But I said, you know, we don't have coal in Vermont, but we do have electricity. And thank you for keeping our lights on for so long. Now, David and I teamed up, because these coal miners were getting totally screwed. They'd worked for these coal mining companies. The coal mining companies promised health care benefits in their retirement. When the retirement came, the coal mine declared bankruptcy, the company, reorganized as a new company, and stuck it to them on the health care benefits. And these guys need health care. I mean, you're in there, so David and I introduced legislation and worked with, of all people, Mitch McConnell, and we got their health care benefits restored. But that's the kind of outreach I think we have to have, because these are good people, they're good Americans. So our commitment to a clean energy economy has to be a commitment. It has to include a commitment to bring folks along who are on the losing end of this. Thank you. Yes, sir.
I just want to inform Susan that industry will provide what the consumer demands. And it's not industry that's the blame. It's what the public wants.
You know, that's true, but limited, okay? Because I think there's a lot of demand for like electric vehicles now. But what I see in
They
Washington,
don't sell.
pardon me,
They don't sell.
They do too.
There's nowhere to plug them in.
They're too expensive.
They're being discounted. They don't sell.
I'm looking for
You know-
a Subaru and they don't sell them.
That's what people.
well, my point here is that there's a link between public policy and consumer choice. You said they don't sell to a lot of people, that's right. But part of the reason they don't sell is you've got to get the cost down, And you've gotta, in order to get the cost down, it's like a solar panel. The cost of a solar panel is about 1/3 today what it was 20 years ago. So there's like an initial phase in public policy where you have to decide, will we have some public investment in order to get something started? And then hopefully that industry gets on its feet and you don't need the public investment. So that's a public policy role. If you get those costs down, you see more people having it as an option, that they can put solar panels on, or they can buy an electric vehicle. But it also means if you can have an electric vehicle, I mean, my wife and I went through this, and we didn't buy one quite yet. And the concern we had is, are there enough charging stations? So, you know, because I drive around the state a lot, and I can't get stuck, you know, none of us really get stuck. So that's a public investment aspect that increases the range of choice that's available, all right? And that's what I think is the link between public policy and then the choices that you have. If we have public policy that makes it possible for you to afford an electric vehicle, then you've got the choice. But if it's gonna be 3 times what it is if you're getting your other vehicle, then you're not really gonna be in a position to make it. Okay.
Could I adjourn the meeting, and then anybody wants more questions, could you stay for a while?
Yeah, but thank you all very much.